Okay, and welcome back. Here we go, hour number 3. We're going to take another look at a very, very critical subject. This is a true international, global humanitarian crisis. It happens to involve white people, Caucasians. So guess how much coverage it's getting in the world press? Zero. Virtually nothing. Here to talk to us about the crisis of nearly 4 million whites in South Africa at the hands of approximately 40 million blacks is Karin Smith. Karin is a South African expatriate. She lives in Texas. She knows exactly what's going on down there. She has her own radio outlet. You can see it under her name and guests. Her website is extraordinarily helpful. I do try to post as many pieces of important material as I can. We have another source in South Africa that sends me things as well. He's been on the program several times. We're going to continue doing our best to bring publicity to this issue before more whites are slaughtered. Slaughtered. It's not a pretty sight. It's a very ugly situation that is only going to get worse. Karin, thank you for being here. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you tonight.
Well, I'm honored to have you on. I'm more than honored to know that somebody is out there working 7 days a week to try their best against almost impossible odds to fight against the prejudicial bias of the American media, the liberal American media, the Zionist American media, against giving the whites in South Africa their just due in media coverage. They don't get it. They get nothing. First of all, let me back up and ask you when you came here, how long you've lived here, and a little bit about your background to introduce you to our listeners.
Jeff, I've been here 6 years. I became an official African American in September of last year. I was born in Rhodesia.
Sure.
Lived through part of the Civil War there. We had a terrible time. My mom was pregnant with my youngest brother and had a brick thrown through her windscreen, which caused her to crash into a wall. And she almost gave birth to my brother in the street. And on the same night, my dad, who did block watch in the areas, which meant the guys took it in turns to patrol blocks at night to keep us safe, because at that stage they were killing your dogs and putting their heads on your gate posts, and they'd knock on the door at night, and if you opened the door, they'd chop your head off with a panga. You call that here a machete, but in Africa it's called a panga. So my dad was part of the block watch, and he and the guys that were patrolling with were beaten mercilessly and left on our front veranda, our porch, for dead. So my parents said, with 5 kids, one newly born, they can't do this.
Right.
So we left Rhodesia. But at that stage, if you left, you were allowed to take what fitted in your vehicle. You couldn't sell your house. You couldn't trade in your insurance policies, your retirement policy, anything. You just had to leave with what fitted in your car.
All of your assets were left and taken control of by Mugabe and Zimbabwe.
Everything was left behind. So you can imagine, with 5 children, one of newborn, not very much fits into the vehicle.
No.
So we left and we went to what was then Southwest Africa and is now called Namibia.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived on the edge of the town, and at that time we were fighting the border war in Angola against the communists, from the Cubans and the Russians,
right,
were training SWAPO in Angola.
These are the Soviet Russians, just to be sure people understand that.
Yes. Yes, and they used to come through Southwest Africa to get to South Africa. It was the beginnings of the ANC armed wing who were being trained there. Mm-hmm. And we were held hostage in our home for 3 days by a band of these guys with AK-47s coming through to go to South Africa. Mm. And once more, my father said, you know what, 5 children, 2 of them girls, I can't do this. We've got to leave. So we left, and we went to South Africa. Well, for a long time in South Africa, things were okay.
They were stable. They were stable. This is now. Let me interrupt one thing here. This was when apartheid was still in effect in South Africa. But what apartheid did, and we've talked about this on the program, Karin, in the past, was actually held that country together as a functioning state. Without apartheid, well, you see what's happening now. We've discussed it. It's going back to the Middle Ages, and that's exactly what it was. And go ahead.
Well, apartheid literally was separateness, separate development, so that each tribe had their own homeland, where they were ruled by their own chiefs, lived under their own laws,
right,
but were supported by the white tax base in South Africa.
It's amazing. So, yeah.
we built them airports and hospitals and schools and universities. I mean, Saint Nelson Mandela, poor man who was
Saint Nelson Mandela, the communist murderer.
There you go. That was said with more than a hint of sarcasm.
I gotcha.
However, this poor oppressed fellow, he got his schooling and his university lawyer's degree under this dreaded system of apartheid. Also, I believe that, I can't remember the Indian fellow, Mahatma Gandhi. He also got his lawyer's degree under the dreaded apartheid system in South Africa. So we weren't that bad. Anyway, during that time in South Africa, the black population grew by a massive 920%. So if we were oppressing them and killing them in their millions and treating them so terribly badly, why did every black from every corner of Africa want to come to South Africa?
Absolutely.
Economic power.
Yep.
Also, our Western medicine increased their life expectancy by huge amounts, decreased baby in-birth deaths by enormous numbers, educated them. I mean, when the whites landed in South Africa, firstly, there were no blacks there, none whatsoever. Secondly, when we did meet up with the blacks, they didn't have a written language. They didn't have the wheel. They didn't have any...
They'd never even built a 2-story building left to their own devices.
In general, they were pastoral. They didn't build houses anyway.
Right. No, they just moved from area to area. They were like hunters and grazers.
Yes, absolutely. And fighters. Because what was to become the Zulu nation, when the fur trekkers left the Cape and started trekking north to get away from British and Dutch rule, which alternated for a while there, they didn't like the loose living and the bad morals of the Brits. So they started trekking. They also didn't like the taxation without representation, and also not selling their produce to the Dutch East India Company at fixed prices and not being able to sell them to anybody else. So the whole
the British have a problem doing that, don't they? They did it to us, and we went independent. We had a Revolutionary War to get rid of that. Anyway.
Well, we did too. We had 2 Boer Wars to get rid of that.
Yeah.
But they brought in the Second Boer War. They brought in 45,000 from England to fight the war against a handful of Boers. And we didn't have a Boer army as such. We had commandos, which were volunteers. And they had to, when they reported for duty, they had to bring a horse, a blanket, a firearm, which in those days was a Martini Henry, which was one of those front-loader things, They had to bring that along, and rations for 7 days. And
that was basically a single-shot rifle.
Yes, it was. It was. It was one of those that you had to stick a...
I remember. I've seen them. They were kind of collector's pieces, interesting design.
Absolutely. So the Boers had that. And they weren't a paid army. They didn't get paid for their service. But the British did not beat us in war. They beat us in the concentration camps because the Boers didn't have to have supply lines like the Brits did. Every single farm was their supply area. So they could, they could go into any farm and get supplies and have a night's sleep, or go home and bring in their harvest and come back to the wall.
Right.
And the British had to have long supply lines from Natal up to the Transvaal. And the Boers would attack the supply line. So on their little Boer ponies, which were very tough little ponies, they used to gallop out from behind the nearest hill, attack the supply line, and before the Brits knew what was happening, they disappeared again. So when the British Army got wise to this form of attack, they introduced a scorched earth policy, which burnt the farms, salted the lands, poisoned the waters, and put the women and children in concentration camps.
And let them die there in many cases.
They died of dysentery and starvation and all kinds of things. Yeah. A quarter of the Boer population died in those concentration camps.
Now, these are the British people killing other Caucasian Christian peoples. Think about it. It's crazy. Ugly.
And yes, that was basically about gold and diamonds, because at that time, gold and diamonds had been discovered in the two Boer republics, which were actual countries accepted by the rest of the world. They were countries on their own, the two Boer republics. And then they discovered gold in one and diamonds in the other. And the British, of course, their coffers having been depleted by many wars all over the world in all their colonies, wanted that money.
You bet.
So the Boers who had discovered the diamonds said, look, you can take the area that has the diamonds. We don't want to fight with you. Take it and just let us keep on with our lives. But they were not satisfied with that. And so the Boer Wars began. And as I say, the Boers were not beaten in battle. They were beaten by having their women and children starved. And
they kept them hostage, and they were being killed off by the British. Just absolutely subhuman behavior by the Brits.
Totally. So if you understand the travails of the Boer population from the very beginnings in 1652 in the Cape up until today, they have only in the very beginning, when they landed in Cape Town, that was the only time in their history that they have been the majority. Once they started trekking and opening up the rest of the country, they've been the minority ever since. So in the 1913s, the British instituted a form of apartheid. They disallowed mixed marriages and the blacks to live in white areas, and they instituted the homelands for the blacks.
So you're saying that this was a British policy, not a Boer policy?
No, it was a British policy. But when the Boers came into power in 1948, and the National Party took over the rule of the country, still under British rule, but they were politically in control until the 60s, when we got independence from them, from the Brits. Then the Boers tightened up on the apartheid system, because the British had then lumped all of these homelands into one country, homogenous country called South Africa. So now we were supposed to live with these 13 or more differing tribes, warring tribes who killed each other wholesale, and try and make this country work. So apartheid was a form of self-defense, really, to protect the minority from these hordes of blacks that wanted a part of this economic success.
Sure.
And to this day, the blacks still live in their tribal areas with the self-segregation, with their tribal leaders and their chiefs and their kings, etc. So it's not like I am not saying apartheid was a perfect system, but if you understand the needs of the time, you will understand that it was the only way to keep this handful of whites safe from the ever-growing amount of blacks. And it was a...
And today it's grown, Karin, to approximately 40 million blacks to 4 million whites. I'm rounding it off. That's it.
Probably a bit more. The figures are saying that there are probably 70 million blacks now.
70? Well, because of the people fleeing from Zimbabwe?
Yes, that's mainly Zimbabweans and Mozambicans, but they're coming from all over Africa.
Really?
To South Africa. Yes. We have approximately
70 million against 4.
Not 4, because the figures say that almost 1 million have left the country since 1994. So that 4.5 million was a figure given in the early 2000s, and since then, or those who could leave have left. So they're saying almost 1 million whites have left. So that brings you down to 3.5 million. Of that 3.5 million, an approximate 1 million are living in absolute squalor and poverty because of the 114 or 119 race-based laws that exclude them from the workplace. So they've lost their jobs. Middle class and upper class educated South Africans lose their jobs and can never get another one. So if you lose your job, you soon lose your house, your car, your kids at school, and everything, and you end up on the streets because your savings don't last very long. And we now have approximately, we can't get numbers, but I work very closely with a charity that works amongst the white squatters,
right.
And the figure is close to 1 million, over 300,000 children in these informal settlements.
Well, what you're describing here are true, honest refugees, not this Middle Eastern stuff or the blacks from sub-Saharan Africa who claim to be Muslim. Many of them aren't, of course, and who go to Libya or Northern Africa, get on these rafts, sail, as you know, 12 miles off the coast of Libya, put out a distress signal, and an NGO ship races to pick them up, doesn't bring them back to Libya, doesn't take them back to anywhere. It takes them to Europe, for God's sakes. This is incredible.
Absolutely. Now, Jeff, if people had been watching South Africa for the last 22 years, they could have taken steps to prevent this happening. But once 1994 happened and St. Nelson took over the country, that was the end of the world interest. Well, yes, that's how the world refers to him.
I got it. Oh, yeah.
I mean, this terrorist scum who was a communist until the day he died, who sang "Kill the Boer" in front of the press, and they've made a terrific speech about how we must all work together as one and create this rainbow nation. That a piece of garbage man, St. Nelson. Anyway, once his Communist Party took over the country, that was the end of it. The press lost interest, the world lost interest, and moved on. But if they had been watching, Jeff, they would have seen what was coming to the rest of the world.
It's been a nightmare beyond imagination for these people. I've done several programs, and I did programs, 15 years ago with somebody in South Africa about the farm murders back then when they first really began in earnest. It hasn't slowed down. My audience is probably well aware of it, those who have been listening for any length of time. It is something that must be addressed. Now, I want to start to go through this. What have you, Karin, done? What has your approach been? What has your plan been? And I mentioned to you on the phone earlier today, United Nations. Let's talk about the United Nations. What in the hell is going on with the UN?
We have sent 3, South Africa, not we, myself, but 3 deputations have been to the United Nations. The first 2, nothing came of them. The third time was 2.5 odd years ago when Front National in South Africa, a burgeoning white political party, sent a deputation to the United Nations. And they finally got heard. And the ANC tried to close them down in their opening statement. The ANC accused them loudly, very loudly, of racism and told them to get out. But the American deputation to the United Nations said, no, we want to hear them. So they heard our plea and our figures and our facts.
Which delegation, Karin? I'm sorry. Which delegation? The
American.
All right.
The U.S. delegation said no. Right. The ANC must kindly sit down and keep quiet. They want to hear our case.
Right.
So Front National pled our case to the United Nations. And they said we would hear from them. Well, it's 2.5 years later. And they have agreed to come and investigate South Africa, but not for farm murders, not for human rights, not for the BBBEE laws, not for any of that. They're coming to investigate the poor black situation there, because admittedly, there are many millions of dirt poor blacks who are just spoiling for a fight. And they now, anyway, so that is what has come of that. Nothing much. So then we sent a deputation to the International Criminal Court, and I can forward you the papers that we sent to them. And that was also 2 or 3 times. But the latest time was about 2 years ago. Well, nothing has come of that either. And then, and this is the only a small glimmer of hope in a very dark area, Transvaal Agricultural Union sent Henk van der Graaf and a team of guys to the Unrepresented Nations organization on behalf of the Khoisan, the original settlers that we found in place when we got to the Cape, and the white people of South Africa.
Yeah.
And that was in Australia last year, and UNPO listened to them. And one of their guys has been now appointed to the board of UNPO. So it is possible.
Explain what UNPO is again.
The Unrepresented Nations People's Organization. So it is for minority groups around the world who have no representation to speak for them.
Right.
And they speak, but they're not a very powerful or hugely known organization.
No, they're not known at all. First I've heard of them.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know what kind of influence they can have on anything. And then the other thing that was achieved was we had a Dutch journalist called Ariana State, who was a journalist in South Africa.
I had her on the program.
You have? Well, yeah. She was instrumental in getting Gregory Stanton from Genocide Watch to go to South Africa twice and report on the state of affairs there. And he was very, very liberal, a very liberal man who spoke out harshly against the apartheid regime. But his report got very little traction in the world either. Mm-hmm. So although he put South Africa on stage 6 of 8 stages of genocide, which is the preparation stage, 7 being full-on genocide, and 8 being the denial and cover-up.
Where are we? Number 6?
Yeah, number 6.
Okay.
But the world still didn't take notice.
You have done everything almost humanly possible to gain notoriety, gain attention, gain some kind of understanding. I'm not even saying the word sympathy here. I'm talking about understanding of the situation, the dynamics of it. Nothing has been done to help, nothing at all. And I'm here to tell you, if I had anything to say about this, I would demand of this government that it treat these people under the Geneva Conventions as legitimate refugees whose lives are in imminent danger, and they should all be brought here to the U.S., and they would, I can almost guarantee it, that within a year they'd all be self-supporting. They wouldn't be on lifetime Social Security and Medicaid. They work. South African people are extremely disciplined and brilliant at approaching a problem and solving it. I know this from talking to many of them. If they were to come to this country, and this country were to give them, the American government owns, 60 or 70% of the land in this country or more. If they were to give these people a piece of land with water and power and turn them loose, they would turn it into a fully functional, a major plus for whatever state it happened to be located in. There's no doubt in my mind. I just don't know how to get these people here because the South African black government will not let them go easily.
Well, Jeff, I'll tell you the story of me coming here as an illustration. I'm here. I'm a citizen. I made it, but I will tell you the story of how difficult it was. I met my husband online, and he came to South Africa to meet me, and we got married in South Africa. Now, after 2 years of not being able to get a job because he was a white male, he said, this is not the way people live. A man does not be supported by his wife. We're going back to America, and I will support you properly. This is unacceptable.
What an interesting story. So this was an online meeting. He came down there,
Yes.
married you, and then his pride and dignity would not allow you to support him, and he brought you back here to the States. Yeah, very interesting.
Now, I wanted to come to the States. So he petitioned to have me as his wife come to the States. So first we had to get an American sponsor. It couldn't be a family member. So we had to get a sponsor that would send in 3 years of their tax returns and sign a paper saying that if I applied for any state aid in the first 5 years of being here, my sponsor would be responsible for paying the state,
Right.
the federal back that money.
Of course. Yeah.
So we had to do that. Then
Funny how they don't do that with Muslims.
No. But we had to do that. So we found somebody to do that for me. Then I had to get an unabridged birth certificate because in South Africa you get a short one that's got the date of birth, where you were born, your parents' names. But there is such a thing as an unabridged one, which you have to apply to the government for.
I see.
You have to get an unabridged marriage certificate, a tax clearance certificate, a police clearance certificate. So, thinking this is going to take a few minutes, I go to Home Affairs and apply for this paperwork. Well, I got my marriage certificate back saying that I was married to a South African. Now, my husband is an American born and bred, had permanent residence in South Africa, but was never a South African. So I had to send it back and get it redone, which took another 6 months. Then I applied for my police clearance. When I took my police clearance into your consulate, they said it was printed on the wrong paper. I must go back and get another one. So I went back to get another one, which took a year.
Oh, my God.
By which time all my other paperwork had expired. My medical clearance, all of those things had expired. So I had to start the whole process again. So, right, eventually I got all my paperwork together. But you have to come here with a return ticket. Because when you land in this country, you have to undergo an interview with USCIS here at the airport you land at. And if they don't like you, they send you back. So here I come, 13-hour flight to Atlanta, and I land there, and I'm interviewed by this gentleman. And luckily, he accepted me, and I get allowed in. But I had a conditional residence here because I had not been married 5 years to my husband, and they take it for granted that you married in order to come to the country, not because you love the guy, just so that you can come here.
I got it.
Within another 2 years, I had to reapply to get that condition lifted.
Oh, my.
So I reapplied. Some unknown person in Virginia sent me a letter saying, this is your deportation date. You have not proven to our satisfaction that you have a good faith marriage. So we are deporting you on this date. Make sure you have the money available for your ticket.
Oh, Karin. Oh, hi.
So even if you're an American, how do you prove you have a good faith marriage?
Right.
I had sent in our bank statements in both our names, our insurance in both our names. We bought the house in both our names, our car insurance in both our names.
Sure.
That wasn't good. How do you prove it?
Wasn't good enough.
No. So I went to everybody I knew in this town and got a letter from them. I inundated these people with paper until they must have hated me, saying that they knew us, that we do everything together, we live together. Apart from being in our bedroom, they do know that we are together.
Wow.
So a year later, they said, okay, you can now have your permanent residence. Fine. So then you have to go for citizenship. So I sent my citizenship papers in, which they accepted. But because at that time all the dreamers were being processed, my papers just sat on somebody's desk for 3 years.
3 years. 3 years while they're processing these dreamers.
Yeah, while I waited. And you cannot contact anybody. You can go online, put your number in, and it's being processed. But you cannot contact somebody. You cannot get hold of a person. You cannot deal with anybody. You just wait. Anyway, eventually, they told me that in 10 days I have to be in Dallas for my citizenship test. Now, I just come out of hospital with neck surgery. they replaced 3 vertebrae in my neck.
That's very serious stuff. Yeah.
I was pretty feeble.
Yeah.
And thought of going on a plane to Dallas and then doing this. Just about slaughtered me. But I thought, if I say no now, they could tell me I'm going home, back to South Africa. So we went to Dallas and did this thing.
Wow.
Then we had to wait another 4 months for my ceremony, which was in Amarillo, and I finally became a citizen. But at this stage, if I were to break any laws, they can take away my citizenship and see.
You're still basically on a probationary status, I guess, huh?
Pretty much.
Well, how many years altogether did this horror story take you just described to us?
8 years. 8 years and $25,000.
That makes you, in my book, more of an American patriot trying to gain your citizenship here than almost any other refugee would qualify for. You have paid the price time and time and time again. I don't know what we're going to do, Karin. How do we, as Americans, can I, for example, sponsor a South African family if I were to give somebody a job to bring them over here? How does it work?
Okay, the problem with that, Jeff, and now I work with a lot of South Africans who would like to leave the country. I have a donate button on my website where you can donate to this cause. So people who are able to get a visa, I will help them pay for it, help pay for their tickets, and I'll support them here while they wait for their asylum hearing, which can take 4 years, in which time they cannot work, they cannot send their kids.
It's funny how Muslims and blacks being brought in here by the United Nations don't have to wait 4 years for an asylum hearing.
No. And they get Social Security numbers and green cards.
For life.
But these people do not. So if you wanted to sponsor a family here, it's not a good idea to bring them in on a work visa. First of all, a work visa will cost you $4,000 to $5,000, you yourself.
Wow.
Then you bring them in. That's fine. But they are tied to you, and that is why and the tech companies love those visas, because that person is tied to your company. If they leave their job, they have to go back home.
Wow.
So we had a family who were here on a work visa, and they had 4 American children, and their boss died. So they asked, could they transfer their work visa to another company, because they'd been offered another job.
Of course, yes.
And they were told, no, you have to go home. Anyway, there's a huge uproar about this. The church tried on their behalf. Everybody tried to keep these people here. They were sent home, and within 6 weeks, that entire family of 6 people were murdered.
Oh my God! That blood is on the hands of the American government.
It is. I'm afraid. So, no, a work visa is not the answer.
Well, you're helping me understand. This is very important. So, I'm all ears. A lot of people are listening right now. Go ahead.
Well, Jeff, because I try so hard to help these people, a lot of South Africans do not want to leave because their families have been there 400 years. They're probably still paying for a farm that they'll pay for until they're murdered, etc. So they do not want to leave. It is their country, their land, and they're not going. But there are an equal number of people who would leave if they could, but they cannot. You take these people in the squatter camps. They have no job, no house, no food. They can't educate their children. If their children get sick or they get sick, there's no medication for them, no hospital services for them, nothing for them. How are they going to leave? Even if they could get a visa, how are they going to leave?
So what are we to say here? That they're trapped until they're executed?
Totally trapped until they are murdered. And they are, as you know, Jeff, a murder in South Africa is not a drive-by shooting. They shot my father, so sorry. I'm sorry.
This is behavior that again has no place on this planet, none. And I'm not saying that it's the only example. This species of ours seems to be failing, It's digressing. It's deconstructing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I won't talk about that one. I'll talk about something else. So, they'll come to your home and they'll wait for you to come home. They won't rob the house because you're not there. It's not opportunistic crime. They will come and wait for you to come home. And as the family come home, they will tie you up. And then they often cut the father's eyelids off so that he cannot close his eyes to what is happening to his family.
Oh my God. These are not human beings. I'm sorry. No chance.
They will rape the mother and daughter in front of the father and sons with broken bottles, with sharpened broomsticks, with...
I understand.
The sons have been drowned in boiling water, hung up to die in the garage, burnt with hot irons. They took an 86-year-old woman the other day and kept her captive for 3 days while they drilled her legs and arms with an electric drill until she bled to death.
Who are these? Are just the lowest class of the blacks, or are these upper class, or are the government agents directing the lower classes? Who are these people? They're not people, I'm sorry. Who are these monsters?
Jeff, you have at least 13 separate tribes in South Africa who, left on their own, would be at war with each other. So the government decided on this brilliant strategy. If we have a common enemy, we can unite the tribes and they will go to ANC forever. So the common enemy now is the whites. And everything in the last 22 years of ANC rule is the whites' fault. So if you have a president who never went to school a day in his life, never, who was taught to read and write by a junior school dropout.
Yes.
That's our president. And then he sings, "Bring me my machine gun and I will kill the Boer."
I know, I saw the video.
Yes, but that he doesn't just do it once. It's at every meeting.
Okay, so he's inciting the...
genocide.
This is an international crime against humanity.
Yes, it is. And the South African Human Rights Council found that it was illegal to sing that song, but they sing it anyway. And the other young firebrand in charge of the economic freedom fighters, Julius Malema, who's even more frightening than our president. Yeah,
Malema is a bad man. I understand.
Oh, he's terrible.
Yeah.
He is a dreadful man. So he sings "Kill the Boer." And he was taken to court about it. So now he sings "Kiss the Boer."
Same thing. I get the picture.
You know what? It means exactly the same thing.
Of course
but
it
now
does.
We can't take him to court for it. So if you have these people singing it in Parliament, at the opening of Parliament, "Kill the Boer," bring me my machine gun so I can kill the Boer, what do you expect is going to happen? And yet they swear blind that it is ordinary crime. And on your death certificate, where you have been tortured to death by these savages, they write natural causes.
Of course. So, all lies.
What are you going to do?
I mean, when I hear this, Karin, I just don't believe that we are at this point in our evolution as a species. Now, there are different races, so I'm not talking about all the races, but how can it be that the Caucasian race, especially, does nothing to help its own kind? Well, I should point to Europe. It's doing nothing to help its own kind in Europe either.
No, because of this whole white guilt and reparations and crap that is poured. Sorry.
That's okay. No, you're right. You're right.
You know, our kids are raised on that. And so...
they're conditioned, they're programmed, I understand. When I see Europeans doing nothing to protect their families, their culture, their history, their heritage, their homes, their countries, I am amazed. And I'm to the point now where I do believe that there must be some kind of an electromagnetic effort underway through cell phone towers to sedate these people and take away from them their instinct of self-preservation. And there are electrical frequencies for all of these things because we're electrical beings first. And they know what the frequencies are to these things. Something's going on.
They would fight. But the first thing the ANC did was confiscate our firearms, which are now
there you go.
Sold by the police to criminals and rented out by the day to criminals.
Rented out even.
Rented out. So we are disarmed.
Karen, what happens when the whites eventually are no longer much of a factor in South Africa? South Africa they'll climb back up in the trees there. They'll go back into the Middle Ages. South Africa will no longer be even a ghost of a first world or second world country. It'll be third world at best. They'll have to hire white contractors to come in to try to straighten it out, but it won't work. I don't think anybody would go there and work if they had to.
No. Jeff, it is already very third world. Do you know that last month, the police announced that they are hiring private security companies to protect their policemen on duty at night because the police can't do that themselves.
Unbelievable.
And when my parents were attacked, my mom called the police and said, I've got my son and my husband lying on the floor bleeding. Please, can you send somebody? And they said, can you identify your attackers by name? And my mother was hysterical.
They said this on the phone, an emergency phone call. We call it 911 over here. And they said, can you identify your attackers by name?
By name. My mother said, don't be damn ridiculous. Of course I can't. Well, then we can't help you. And that's the last we ever heard about it.
This is a crisis, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to do something, but what can we do, Karin? What can we do to help?
Jeff, I would like to introduce you to a wonderful woman, wonderful woman from South African Family Relief Project. They are a charity that I support 100% because I know they do not take 1 cent. They are all volunteers. They work themselves to death to demonstrate this lady who runs it. It was Christmas 2 years ago, and I called her to say Happy Christmas. She was sitting on the floor in her house in front of a candle, having a tin of tuna for Christmas dinner because they had fed the camps with everything they possessed. That's what they had. So these people are sterling people. And they work in the camps, and I would love you to have her on this show.
I'd be happy to help publicize what she and her group and organization are trying to do to help these people. I
did for them, Jeff, is I helped them to raise the money to buy a farm and put up 5 houses on this farm. They're little wooden houses, but they work very hard to put floors and insulation and stuff in them. Yes. And they've got ducks, they've got goats, they've got chickens, they've got a vegetable garden.
Yes.
And they're going to re-skill these people in skills like welding, because there's a huge demand in South Africa for burglar bars and security gates.
I'm sure.
Things like that. And then they will help them to either start a business or get back into a white business and then bring the next people in. So I raise money for them. I raise money for people who can come here and to help them to stay here and keep them alive until they can get an asylum hearing. But this lady, I would really like you to have her on to discuss boots on the ground.
Of course, yeah. Like. Oh, no, of course, I'd be honored to. Please, yeah.
She is a wonderful.
Pass along the invitation. You both come back on together. This is... again, something I'm not hearing. What can be done to get the people out of there?
Okay, the only thing that we're doing, and I'm doing this with the help of some really, really good Americans in D.C. They are not in government, but they live in D.C. And they are helping me to get a package together of facts with cover letter. And they are going to, with the help of lobbyists, who are going to do this for nothing. They're going to deliver to every single congressman by hand this package on South Africa. And then they cannot say that they don't know it. And then what we're going to do It's advertised all over social media with a copy of the letter, and ask every American that is sympathetic to our cause to go onto their congressman's website and give some format of that letter.
Karin, there has to be, among all of the criminal congressmen in this country and congresswomen, there have to be some who would introduce a bill, even if it doesn't get out of committee, who would introduce a bill to declare this issue for what it is, imminent genocide, and to at least get some coverage in the media about it. There has to be somebody. We need a piece of legislation.
You know what they tell you, Jeff? They tell you that refugees are...
it's all a UN problem?
Yeah, it's UN or Amnesty International. So until they take steps to declare you refugees, our government's hands are tied, which is nonsense.
That's BS. Sorry. What about, it's BS. What about Amnesty International? What are they doing? What are they going to do? Why can't they just go in there and declare the situation immediately? Who's running Amnesty International?
Well, we all know the answer to that.
I do, and I didn't want to say it, but it was a rhetorical statement. They're not, all right, I still say we need legislation. We need a bill introduced, even if it's just a publicity matter.
And I'm telling you, Jeff, if that call came tomorrow, I would I would hobble on my poor crippled legs to Congress and stand in front of them and tell them what I'm telling you now. Because I'm so violently, passionately trying to get help for these people. And nobody that can change things is listening.
Why the hell doesn't, I don't get it. Why doesn't the government just say, get the hell out, you've got 6 months to get out, leave all your possessions here, go?
No, because about 3% of the population pays 98% of the taxes.
Oh, so it's all about that.
You understand what 3% of the population it is that is paying those taxes. So they don't want to let their tax base go.
Yeah, but they're going to kill it.
Yes,
so what are they going to do then?
They don't seem to have a concept about it.
They don't think that far. They can't think that far ahead.
No, and they're not going to let us go.
Kill the boar. Nothing about taxes, nothing about the fact that the last vestiges of civilization in South Africa will go away with the white people.
Well, Jeff, in the last 22 years, 750,000 murders. Not all whites, but 750,000.
In how many years?
Murders have taken place in South Africa.
How many years?
75,000, 22 years. It's the rate of war. It's 52 to 90 a day. Murders.
That is the rate of war. That's war.
It is. And yet nobody is paying attention. Nobody wants to hear it. We have approached every mainstream media. We send them letters every month with updates. They don't even acknowledge
Well, I guarantee you're being heard here. And what I would like to do is have you come back once a month, once every 6 weeks, whatever, as often as you want, and bring me people who are there, who can talk. Now, if somebody from down there gets on the radio, they're going to hear about it. They, the enemy, the black government, and they will potentially take reprisals against anyone speaking out against them. When I had Carl Foster on a couple weeks ago, he was getting emails during the broadcast. Stop talking to Rense now. He was getting emails like that.
I know, but Jeff, I have a very good band of South Africans. I've got a lawyer, I've got a politician, I've got a professor who will talk about education. I have a really staunch band of people who are willing to take that risk in order to get the word out.
Well, we'll put one of them on a month here. Every month we'll do one.
Well,
you just let me know. Now let me know who's coming, who you want to put on, and we will do it.
I have really, really good people. I also do a internet TV show once a week on Tuesdays. It's a 2-hour show where we interview South Africans and try and get the word out that way. I'm going on a speaking tour in the next 3 months. I'm going to Tennessee, Arkansas, and Florida to do presentations on South Africa. So if any of your audience are willing to help me with travel money for that, I would be very grateful, because we are not rich people.
Give your website address. It's going up under your name momentarily. Well, here, I'll give it to you. It's radiofreesouthafrica.com. That's the website. radiofreesouthafrica.com. Please visit it. You can find everything there. The YouTubes, it's all there. radiofreesouthafrica.com. Karin, thank you very much. Keep the faith. Let me know who you'd like to bring on next. We'll arrange you in as soon as we possibly can. We're going to keep bringing the message forward to as wide an audience as possible.
Jeff, thank you very, very much for this opportunity. I'm very grateful to you and to all the other show hosts that are willing to stick their neck out and bring spotlight onto this terrible situation.
Well, I'm honored to help. Thank you, Karin. We will talk again soon.
Thank you, Jeff. Good night.
Okay, good night.